everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to Historically Athletic. Today we're going to be going over some of the free agency. It's a frenzy out there right now. Free agency opened up and
they're throwing money around like they're fun coupons.
oh man, it's like that.
You seen Wolf of Wall Street? Hey, look, it's fun coupons.
It's fun coupons.
Fun coupons.
It's like, I was about to say, it's like when you go into those boxes and they have the money in there, you got to catch it all. Like that's what I feel like is going on right now.
I could go into a little bit more of a description, but in a different way. But that would not be safe for kids, so I'm going to leave that alone. No, but
yeah, guys,
in all seriousness, like the amount of money that these teams are throwing around, a lot of them had clear strategies going into this. Yep. But what we're going to be covering in this episode specifically is a lot of the larger deals in terms of player movement, some things that may have surprised us, our thoughts on them, and we'll try to keep it, I guess you could say, as brief and tight as we can in terms of each of these players, just to make sure that we're not keeping you on here for 45 minutes.
Reference.
What? Which one? All of them?
I'm not going to get into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, that's the big thing is, free agency just started up and, it is crazy out there. There's a lot of team players moving, some big names, contracts being signed and so forth, teams changing their whole strategy as far as how they're going to be moving forward for the 2022 season. And it's exciting and, it's confusing all at the same time, especially when you get into the talk of the salary cap and how these teams are able to finagle contracts and how they do back-end deals and so forth and so on. And we'll really dive into the salary cap thing a little bit more so on our next week's segment. But I do want to probably go over just a little bit in regards to that to give you some reference into understanding how that works. But first, we're going to just really talk about, free agency's hit and, it's kind of crazy, especially here in the DFW area, with the news yesterday with the whole Randy Gregory flip-flop signing,
We thought he was going to stay with the Cowboys, and then they had some language in there that he wasn't apparently too happy about, and Denver was ready, willing, and able to pounce and was able to poach Cowboys defensive end, linebacker hybrid Randy Gregory. They drafted him out of Nebraska. He's 29 years old, but has had a lot of problems with suspensions within the NFL's framework, if you will.
And Jerry Jones, 3 years, he barely played.
Yeah, and Jerry really kept the faith with him, and he had a good season last year. He showed what he could do when he was healthy. He doesn't have the normal wear and tear of someone that's 29 years old in this league at that position where you have to bend a lot, where you have to have a lot of flexibility and power. Denver overpaid here.
Well, Dallas was going to have to overpay too. I mean, it was the exact same deal.
I think it's a blessing in disguise.
It's a 5-year, $70 million, worth up to $70 million. 28 is fully guaranteed. Now, the big thing is from what I listened to when I was listening to my own research and doing the analyst work with NFL.com, the main thing that the language that Gregory didn't like was just, the same kind of language that's pretty much in every Jerry Jones contract. And it's the same to the point that is, if you get suspended, the money that we have paid you, it could have been, that we've already paid you or upcoming money that we're going to pay you, they can necessarily, you have to pay that back if you get suspended and you miss time. So I can kind of understand why Gregory sees
with
that
his history.
With his history, kind of withdraws and is like, well, no, I don't want to, I think Shannon Sharp on Undisputed said it best, What if he goes through the whole 2022 season, plays great, lives up to the contract, does well, and then in 2023 he has an issue, gets suspended 4 games, Dallas goes at him, all right, you got suspended, we're going to need some of that money that we paid you last year to get back. But I played well. I already played that full season.
Doesn't
why
matter.
do I need to pay it?
Doesn't matter.
So I can see why he kind of looked, he saw that, and then he got the offer from Denver, who really showed interest, really wanted to come out there. Same deal, $70 million up to 28 guaranteed, 5-year deal, but none of that language in there. So if he does end up getting suspended, he doesn't need to pay the organization back. So I can see why he would kind of go flip-flop here. And then everyone, in the DFW trouncing, the whole deal as far as, well, Randy owed Jerry Jones this, and Jerry Jones owed Randy Gregory this, and yada, yada. They don't owe anyone anything. I mean, that's at the end of the day.
It's all a personal choice.
Yeah, these players are in it for themselves, just like the owners are in it for themselves.
Just like we are in our own
jobs. We're all in it for ourselves. It's got to take care of numero uno, and then you think of everyone as secondary. And so you can't fault Gregory here, but it does beg to wonder. He's going to to Denver, great organization. He's got substance abuse problems in his past.
And Colorado is
a legal state. So you kind of wonder if there's going to be issues with that. He might get suspended, and then you're kind of up a creek without a paddle.
I mean, truth be told, I think the Cowboys actually, and this is nothing against, Gregory's talent as a player or what he's done in the past, what he could do in the future. Talented player. There's no question about that. I think that at the end of the day, he is almost on the wrong side of 30. The Cowboys have invested in a lot of resources in him.
Yeah.
I think that they will be able to manage without him. It will not be the same.
Well,
but they're going to have to really do well in the draft this year or strike gold in the free agency market to replace his production. Truth be told, I kind of hope they go after Carl Nassib, the guy that just got released by the Raiders. I think he'd be a good depth piece, and maybe not a replacement for a guy of Gregory's talent.
Definitely not going to be a replacement for a guy of Gregory's talent. But some other major news in that somewhat regard of that department was, when the Randy Gregory deal fell through yesterday, DeMarcus Ware went on social media, kind of touting, the whole Von Miller going to Dallas. I'd like to see Von Miller, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence on the same team. Ooh, that could have been good. However, breaking news just a couple hours ago.
Von Miller is going to
Buffalo. Buffalo has made some moves as far as contract restructuring and so forth, and signing Miller to a giant deal.
For a 33-year-old Von Miller.
I mean, from what I got in the notes when we looked at the 6-year, $120 million contract with 45 guaranteed at signing.
There's got to be some type of avoidable years or something within that deal to get it across the line.
Oh, yeah, something that we'll get into. And, that kind of leads into a good little just segue into talking about the salary cap real quick, guys. Next week we're going to talk more of our history portion, talk about how the NFL operated prior to the salary cap, which just came about in 94 and has obviously changed each year since with new CBA agreements and so forth and so on. But one thing here, I got from an MSN writer here, Mr. Matt Warren, talking about the NFL salary cap and kind of what void years are, and it matches perfectly. You can tell that Buffalo really was doing this to lead up to the signing of Von Miller because it talks about their own player here, safety Micah Hyde. He had 2 years left on his deal, and they just extended that deal to a 3-year extension, so basically adding 3 void years. And what that means is basically what they're doing here is they're adding dummy years to the end of these seasons as far as contracts are concerned. They're doing signing bonuses that are prorated over the remaining years. So he had... What was it? It was, a couple $1 million here. So he had 2 years left on his contract. They added 3 years to void for 2024, 2025, and 2026. And what it was is basically he was due $2.5 million roster bonus and a $3.7 million of his salary, total salary, which is $4.3 million. It was set to be fully guaranteed this weekend. Well, by extending it and by voiding it to these void years over 3-year extension, it basically took that signing bonus that he was due and compensated it out through the entirety of his contract. So instead of just the 2 years, it extended it 3 years. So now it's extended over 5 years, which broke that down to a cap hit of $1.136 million instead of $5.68 million, or instead of $2.8 million each season that it was going to be over the 2 years. And so with that, they saved $4.5 million in their cap space, which obviously was going to be used to go forward with Von Miller here. And, the problem with this is that you'll see it with, a lot of teams and how the Saints did it with Drew Brees and so forth and so on.
Kick the can down the road.
You're kicking the can down the road. You're robbing your future to pay your present. And that's basically what's going on here. And, It will work when you're in these teams that are in win now mentality.
The win now motel.
Yeah, the win now motel.
I like that.
We're gonna have to
we're gonna have to freaking patent that.
Yeah, because I like
the win now motel. We should get like a shirt made.
There's something going on with that because it is true. That's what the Rams did last year. That's in essential what the Bucks did the year before, and it paid off for both teams. But there's got to be something in that regard, in that language. Contract set up with Vaughn because 6 years, $120 million.
For a guy in his mid-30s, it seems
who had some
preposterous.
injury issues. He's going to come in. He's going to probably play a role player more than anything. He's not going to be an every down player by any means. But
you never know.
But again,
they are determined to get past Kansas City and Cincinnati.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, you end up meeting Kansas City again in the playoffs.
You need the pass rush.
You need Vaughn to step up, and if he gets in there, reminiscent of his Super Bowl 50 MVP performance.
And what he did with the Rams recently to end the season.
Rams. So, I mean, that's the thing is it will pay. If it does pay off, then everyone's like, oh, yeah, that was great. It's nothing to scoff at, whatever. But if it doesn't, you're robbing your future to pay your present.
Right. And speaking of Bills news, they actually ended up bringing back McKenzie. Isaiah McKenzie, I believe was his name.
Isaiah McKenzie, yeah.
So he was a bit of a spark plug when Cole Beasley was hurt and Gabe Davis wasn't 100%.
And
they still had Diggs.
They're losing Emmanuel Sanders this year, so he's going to definitely.
He was a little spark plug. He's going to have a bigger role to play in Buffalo. What did they end up signing? 2 years, $4 million? 2
years, $4.4 million with only 1.25 guarantees. So
that tells me
a very friendly contract.
That tells me there wasn't a huge market for him.
And, Isaiah McKenzie's probably betting on himself a little bit here. It's a 2-year deal, so you got 2 years to really show what you can do. You can step up as the third receiver in that roster, and if he does, he either might get paid somewhere else or they might extend him and so forth.
You just never know. And then I think the next one were 2 offensive linemen to Cincinnati, Mr. Karras and then Mr. Kappa.
So, obviously, we watched the Bengals just, 9 or 7 sacks in the Super Bowl, big ordeal.
And they still almost won.
So
what do they need to do?
Some of these offensive alignment that they've been adding in free agency, it would have been huge for Joe
Cincinnati,
Burrow.
Yeah, for Joey. Yeah.
So they're getting Ted Karras. They signed him to a 3-year, $18 million. We're only $5 million of that's guaranteed. So,
where was he from?
I don't have it on here, and I'm going to have to look that up. Or see why you're going to have to look that up for me.
Let me look it up.
You're pretty quick on that. But the other guards, so they brought in Karras, which is an interior offensive lineman. They brought in Alex Kappa, which is another guard offensive lineman from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that's a big loss for the Bucs. That's a big addition for the Bengals because Kappa he's a hoss in the middle of that interior offensive line.
Patriots is where Karras is from.
So Karras from the Patriots. So that's the thing, and Kappa required a little bit of bigger money here. He got a 4-year, $35 million contract with $11 million total guarantees. And, I got this information here from overthecap.com. They're talking about some of these free agencies. They are grading them themselves based on those grades. And adding both of those type of guards to their offensive line, they gave them B's.
And understandably so, because they needed to make some upgrades. I'm not going to disagree with them there. But on offensive linemen, with regards to guys that have been with the Bucs and stayed with the Bucs, we obviously know Ali Marpet decided to retire, and good on him. But that y'all were able to bring Ryan Jensen back, which as your center, that's humongous.
Ryan Jensen is a top-tier center. He is a mauler. He gets in there. He
makes
does
the
not
calls.
allow. He does not allow sacks either. The only, I think, when I was reading, doing my research, a few of the sacks that he did allow were on either double teams where he had to switch from one side to the other to help out, and then that player just had rushed through or whatever the case is. He does not allow sacks. And with Tom Brady coming back, obviously that was a factor. Ali Marpet even almost wanted to come back, but he committed to being retired and so forth. But Ryan Jensen comes back on a 3-year deal, $39 million is what it's worth, with $26.5 guaranteed.
Good for him.
I mean, it's rightfully so.
You pay the guys in the trenches that you know are going to be that critical and that stay healthy.
And speaking of, because we lost 2 guards, we lost Kappa to the Bengals and we lost Marpet to retirement. We just traded for Shaq Mason from the Patriots for a 5th round.
That was smart.
Shaq Mason has ruled as a guard since he's been in the NFL over in New England. He's a very good player.
And he knows Brady.
Towards the end of the career, knows Brady a little bit. So I feel like that's going to definitely help us out as far as making this rerun back, to the Super Bowl. But, that's the thing is it all starts up front. To me, it's about the offensive and defensive lines. That's how you build a team.
You have to build them inside out.
Yep. Obviously, quarterbacks are huge and so forth. But these offensive linemen. Speaking of offensive linemen, this is just, we don't have to go too deep into it, but a little sneaky here. The Steelers. The Steelers have signed, a good left tackle.
Who, Chukwuma Okorafor?
Okorafor, 3-year, $29.25 million with
they
needed to
upgrade their O-line.
And then they also signed another guy. Let me bring it up here real quick if I can find it. Oh man, I think they signed another tackle as well. So they're definitely
whoever they
signed.
It was the right call because they need help.
Yeah, and they just got Trubisky in there because Big Ben's retirement and so forth.
They're taking a punt.
Trubisky's a little bit more of a mobile quarterback.
But they're taking a punt.
So they can move that offensive line. They can move their offense and so forth and so on. But, going from Roethlisberger to Trubisky is definitely a downgrade. However, it's better than having no quarterback at this time.
I mean, Mason Rudolph isn't terrible, but I don't know if Mason is as good as Trubisky, but who knows?
And Trubisky having, new life and a new team could possibly be good for him.
So then what was the next one? I think it was I think we wanted to discuss the two big wide receiver deals that came through. Michael Gallup re-signing in Dallas, Christian Kirk signing in Jacksonville for big money, and Amari Cooper being traded from the Cowboys to the Browns.
Big deals, big deals. And real quick, I just found it. James Daniels, right guard, was who the Steelers just got.
Got it. Okay, that follows.
But, Michael Gallup, I've kind of harped praise on Michael Gallup over last year.
Stone hands.
He does drop, the easy balls, but he goes up and he gets those big-time contested balls. He makes big plays when it matters. And Dak, you kind of would see over the course of a game, Dak trusts him a little bit more than he did the other two. And
he trusts CD.
He did trust,
and he
CD.
trusts Schultz.
But you saw, like I said, you saw him go to Gallup a little bit more so in those much needed times. But they signed him to a big deal. I mean, 5 years, $57.5 million with 27 guaranteed. 23 of that is full guaranteed.
And I'm happy for Michael Gallup in the context of he was a guy that they drafted.
Yep.
When he's healthy,
Jerry likes to keep his homebrew guys.
When he's healthy, he's a good player. But I'm curious to see how this pans out. But that deal that he got pales in comparison to what Christian Kirk just got from the Jags, and I think this is a big overpay.
I think that's a big overpay too. Christian
what did he end up
Kirk
getting?
Ended up getting 4 years, up to $72 million, with a full 37 guaranteed. I mean, for a guy that was second in Arizona.
Third for most of his career because you had Larry Fitz and you had D-Hop.
And then you had A.J. Green this last year where he kind of traded in and out.
He's the slot guy.
It's going to be interesting to see. And, the Jaguars, I kind of like what they've been doing in the offseason.
They've been aggressive.
They have been very aggressive here. Let me pull up those.
Didn't Brandon Scherf get signed by them too?
So, obviously, their biggest signing, yes, they did get the guard, Brandon Scherf.
From the Commanders,
From the Commanders. They got to, protect Herbert out there. Or not Herbert. Lawrence. But their biggest signing.
The AFC could really be loaded, even more loaded than I realized at quarterback. Good gracious.
Got a lot of quarterbacks. But they went out and they got the Rams corner in Darius Williams, signed him to a 3-year, $30 million deal. 18 of that is guaranteed, and with incentives, he can get the max,
almost
which is $39 million. So they got a good corner there. They got Christian Kirk. They also had a tight end, Evan Ingram.
From the Giants, who really hasn't lived up to his rookie year.
He is not. He's a freak. He's an athletic freak who hasn't just lived up to it.
And if he can get in the right system, you wonder.
They also added Zay Jones.
Wasn't he in Detroit?
He was in Vegas.
Vegas, okay, that's right.
Derek Carr, for being the type of quarterback that he is, he's a very good quarterback. He gets his receivers paid. Whether they stay in Vegas or they go somewhere else, he gets his receivers paid. And then they also added a linebacker and a defensive tackle. So the Jaguars have been really active in this early free agency.
Well, considering how last season went with Urban, they're trying to erase that from memory.
Yeah, they definitely
Other than, obviously picking up Lawrence in the draft. But then,
and obviously they did have, one of the top tier dollars in free agency to go with it.
Right, but I think we needed to go back and at least touch on that other receiver bit with Cooper getting traded from the Cowboys. Yeah. And I thought he was going to get cut. I thought they were just going to straight up cut him. I'm surprised they were able to find a deal for him. Pleasantly surprised in that respect. But what was the haul there? It was pretty small.
So it was pretty small, things considering when you talk about Amari Cooper, who was a first-round draft pick, big talent, especially what Dallas had to give up to get him from Oakland at the time. They traded him to Cleveland. Dallas gets a 5th, and then they swap 6th-round picks. So a little bit of an upgrade in the 6th round.
Better than just cutting the guy.
But better than just cutting the guy. Exactly. And Amari Cooper is a fantastic receiver. He's a great route runner, top-tier route runner in the NFL. Problem is he just disappears. And, he has about 4 games on average where he puts up 100-plus yards, does really well. But then the rest, it's just kind of minuscule. He disappears against good talent.
I don't know if minuscule is the word. I think you can just say meh.
Yeah.
You can just say meh.
Yeah.
He's a really good route runner, though. And I think that Amari seems like a very introspective guy. Seems very intelligent.
Very into himself, yeah. Or not into himself, but very
I understand what you meant, yeah. But even still, I still look at that as a downgrade to a certain extent from the Cowboys. But you can find really solid receivers in the draft at a pretty low cost fairly easily. Right. That's why I think...
Especially the talent that has come out the last 2-3 years.
That's why I think that at the end of the day, Cedric Wilson going to the Dolphins and Amari Cooper getting traded to the Browns is not going to be as detrimental to Dak because he's already got Lamb, who's ready to hopefully assume that number one role. You've got Gallup there. You've got Dalton Schultz there on the franchise tag to kind of be that underneath guy, that safety blanket that Witten was for years with Romo.
Right.
Now what you really need is a slot guy. And you can find slot guys in the draft.
Slot guys in the draft. And, I just saw my notes here. We talked about the Charger, or not the Chargers, the Jaguars going all in. The Chargers have been really going at it.
They want to maximize Herbert's window in his rookie contract, and I don't blame them. But they ended up going and getting J.C. Jackson.
J.C. Jackson, top tier corner and free agent this year.
And they ended up trading for Khalil Mack from Chicago, and they went and re-signed Mike Williams to pair him with Keenan Allen, which I think was.
Which was good, because Mike Williams kind of had the same thing as far as Amari Cooper. He would have great games, and then
3 for 30, I believe it was.
Yep. But yeah, no.
3 for 60.
3
wow.
3 for 60 with 40 full guaranteed. They might have overpaid a little bit just for that. Familiarity. Keep him with that. It's nothing to scoff at. Mike Williams, when he is on, he has fantastic games. It's just a matter of keeping him in that consistency.
You really were betting on him in fantasy.
Oh, and he helped me a couple times.
First part of the year.
And then the rest of the year, he disappeared.
Well, Keenan Allen is what drives that offense.
Oh, for sure.
Along with Eckler.
But, they needed to upgrade that defense tremendously, especially in the division that they're in and so forth. And going out and get J.C. Jackson. I mean, that's huge. They signed him to a big contract, 5 years, $82.5 million, with $40 million fully guaranteed. And then they went out, signed 2 defensive tackles to plug that middle up because they were the worst in the run.
Against the run.
And then you sign Khalil Mack, or you get Khalil Mack to a trade.
To be on the other end with
of
the
Joey Bosa? I mean, that's incredible. Like I said, think about that division they're in. You're in a division where you got Russell Wilson,
and you got Mahomes, and you got
Carr. I mean, you
got to pressure them.
You got to pressure them. And in that trade with the Bears, they sent a 2020 second-round pick, so this year's second-round pick, and then next year's sixth-round pick.
It's not bad.
Not bad.
But they have to absorb Mac's contract.
And that's a big deal because Mac's contract is a large one. But at the same time, they have that space available where they were able to make it work. So really, I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Chargers. They're trying to make sure that they're not, in the basement, and they're not, the Kansas City Chiefs. I feel like the Kansas City Chiefs have set the bar so high on that AFC division that all these teams are trying to
in the AFC West.
go at them. Yeah.
And then I think the last bit that you wanted to kind of discuss was the Bucs with all their free agents. They're still trying to wade through all that. But remind me, they franchised Godwin, correct?
So they franchised Godwin,
and then they brought back
with hopes of getting a long-term deal done sometime throughout the season.
And Carlton Davis they brought back.
They brought back Carlton Davis, which was huge. 3-year, $44.5 million with $30 guaranteed as far as incentives and stuff like that, but $24.5 fully guaranteed. Carlton Davis is a great player so far as long as he stays healthy. We did lose Jordan Whitehead, which is a big deal because he is a great run support safety. He ended up going to the Jets, and the Jets ended up getting another great corner out of Seattle and DJ Reed. So the Jets with Robert Salah out there, they're really getting that defensive mind to really build up that defense out there.
Considering what they have to go up against in the AFC East, I mean, the AFC East is getting some decent depth now. I mean, the Dolphins are solid.
Yep.
The Patriots are solid. And then the Bills are the class of that division right now. But I'm never gonna count out Belichick.
You can never count out Belichick. And the way Mac Jones played last year and so forth, there's lots to build on.
Solid but not spectacular.
Exactly. There's lots to build on. Still got to go to work. There's lots to build on, though. But losing J.C. Jackson, losing Shaq Mason,
to be honest,
players.
I trust Bill to draft the guys that he needs to draft. I think that the bigger thing that Patriots are going to have to worry about this year is replacing McDaniels as offensive coordinator. Yeah. I mean, him and Bill worked together for so many years, even when he went to the Broncos for a couple of years to be their head coach with Tebow and all that in the early 2010s. I mean,
it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting. And,
I think he got into a good situation with Mark Davis, though. I think that he's a little bit more patient than his dad was, than Al was in the past to a certain degree.
Right.
But I think that really wraps up the big main deals, right?
Well, there's still a few out there that we got to go over because in order for the Bucs to be able to get some of these things, they had to redo Shaq Barrett's deal. Gronk is still out there, which Gronk says he's not going to play with anyone else but Tom. So he's got to come back to Tampa at some point, I hope. But the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens really have made 2 big splash deals. They signed Marcus Williams, the safety out of New Orleans, stout safety, to a big 5-year, $70 million contract worth up to.
But Wink Martindale's no longer there as their D coordinator, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
They also went out and got Zadarius Smith, the pass rusher. They drafted him originally. He left to go to Green Bay, and now he's back with a 4-year, $35 million deal that's worth up to $50 million on incentives. So, the Baltimore Ravens really made a push there. And, speaking of Carl Nassib that you were talking about possibly going to you'd want to go to the Cowboys.
I think he'd be a good depth the end.
Yeah, the Raiders actually are making some deals. They're in the process of finalizing a deal for Chandler Jones. And in doing so, they have Yannick Ngakoue. And they're going to have to get rid of him, so they're thinking about trading him to the Colts in a deal for Rocky Sin. And Sin is a great corner out there. So, there's lots of things going on here.
There's a lot of moving
Daniels
parts
out there.
There's a lot of moving
parts. He's bringing in Brandon Bolden, which was a
Patriots mainstay,
so forth. So, there is definitely a lot of things going on here. Titans releasing Julio Jones is big because who's going to pick up Julio? Will he maybe return to Atlanta if Deshaun goes to Atlanta? That's a big deal, too, some things like that.
You would think Arthur Blank still probably has a good, cordial relationship with him.
Exactly, because, there's Arthur Blank has such a great reputation in Atlanta. And then the other thing that I should have brought up in the past episode for Deshaun is Arthur Smith is a great quarterback guru coach. Mm-hmm. And bringing him out there would be a big deal, too. But, there's been a few other ones. Speaking of the Titans, they re-signed Harold Landry, which was a big deal. To a big contract, 5 years, $87.5 million with $35.25 fully guaranteed, and possibly up to $52.5.
I think there were three other things with the Cardinals that I found interesting. They brought back James Conner, 3 years, $21 million. They brought back Zach Ertz at 3 years, $31,650, I think.
Yep.
And then they did not decide to re-sign Chase Edmonds, their scat back, if you will. So I think that's going to establish James Conner as the lead back, and they'll probably draft someone to come behind him, or they'll probably have someone on the roster to kind of fill that hole.
For sure.
So it'll be interesting to see how things.
Chase Edmonds ended up going to the Dolphins there for a 2-year deal.
That could help Tua. They really could. They've really struggled to. Miles Gaskin is a nice piece. He's not a 3-down running back.
No, and when you pair him with Chase Edmonds, who's kind of another bruiser, kind of like how Gaskin is.
I looked at him as more of a third down back, more of a scat back.
Really?
Yeah, Gaskin's more of a first and second down, and then Edmonds can kind of be the scat back if you will, to a certain extent. But either way, it's amazing how much player movement we've seen in the first couple of days.
And we didn't even talk about Carson Wentz being traded back to the NFC least.
You know what that's called? You know what that's called, right? That's called Last Chance Saloon.
Last Chance Saloon.
I feel terrible for the guy, but it's the truth.
It is the truth. That's the thing is Carson Wentz, he got traded, from the Colts. The Washington officially receives Wentz. They get a 2022 second-round pick and a 2022 7th-round pick. But Indianapolis gets a 2022 second round, a 2022 third round, and a 2023 conditional third round, obviously based on how well Wentz plays.
That's interesting.
And I really do hope the best for Wentz. I feel like the way things ended and the way things started to end in Philadelphia with him having that MVP season.
And then he gets hurt.
But
they still go with the Super Bowl with Foles.
They put a statue of Foles outside. He has a horrible next year in Philly. They trade him away. The guy's mental just has to be, in the ground. And so hopefully new series, new set in Washington can definitely help him. But there has definitely been some big deals here. We talked about the Bengals getting some guards in the interior offensive linemen. They also go out and get B.J. Hill, which is a very good interior defensive lineman, 3 year, $30 million with 13 fully guaranteed. There is just so much going on that it is so interesting, and really you just got to kind of keep up to it as much as you can, up to date, and just kind of keep an eye out there because it is a frenzy. It really is. They call it free agency frenzy for a reason.
I call it what they call it in the soccer world when they have the transfer market open and players are swapping teams and players are getting moved around. They call it the silly season for a reason. This is the NFL's silly season. Absolutely. Yeah. But we really appreciate y'all listening. We appreciate y'all watching. We appreciate your support. We hope you enjoy the content. We hope you enjoy the banter. even if Big J is looking like an orange dreamsicle today. But again, we really appreciate y'all's support. We hope you enjoy everything, and we look forward to kind of going into the machinations of the salary cap and kind of giving you a historical perspective next week of kind of how things have developed in the NFL over the past 100 years in terms of player trading and how these salaries are kind of allocated, and quite frankly, how teams do salary cap gymnastics every year, like what the Saints have had to do recently, and they're the most prominent example.
Kind of gave you a little bit of an example,
a little bit of a taste
about with how
Micah
the
Hyde and
Bills
the
have
Bills.
done it. So it'll definitely be a good one to really dive into the historical portion. The salary cap's only been around since 1994, so it's still fairly new. And each year the salary cap increases because of the revenue that these teams bring in, and so forth. It'll be a great topic to go over as far as getting back to our roots here at Historically Athletic, where we like to bring the history of the game to you guys into the present day, compare it to how it's how it is right now.
Yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to also diving into some other topics on the historical side. I know that eventually we're going to do our draft preview and things of that nature. We'll eventually get into hopefully some college football previews in terms of what's to come in each conference, and potentially do a little bit of a historical background because of all the realignment stuff that's happening. It'd be nice for some people to kind of know the roots of a lot of those college teams, to give them an idea of where they came from, why powerhouses are looked at as powerhouses, and things of that ilk. So definitely some things to be excited about, and we appreciate y'all listening and appreciate y'all watching, and look forward to seeing y'all next week.
Take care, guys.